Hello and welcome to Willing Spirit. A lot has happened in the last couple of weeks between the long-range missiles being sent to Ukraine, ceasefire talks in the Middle East almost working, and Hunter Biden gets pardoned. It seems the Bidens are trying to start World War III and pardon themselves for it at the same time. Trump has announced that his goal is to bring world peace, and the Bidens are seemingly trying to make it difficult for him. First, let's look at Ukraine. On November 19th, Ukraine launched long-range missiles against the military facility Karachev, marking the first instance Ukraine striking Russia within its interior. ATACMs are the most state-of-the-art long-range missiles in all of US's arsenal. Russia's foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, says missile strikes deep inside Russian territory are an escalatory step. Now, I know what you're thinking. Didn't Trump just win an election in the US saying he's stopping the war in Ukraine? Also, didn't Putin say he's looking forward to negotiating an end to the war? It seems like Zelensky is escalating a war that nobody really wants, alienating all the major players, and he's really excited about the war that he's clearly losing. Also, the Americans know this is just a money laundering scheme by the Bidens because Zelensky has blackmail material on them. Let's recap the last 2 months. Kamala Harris loses the election with 90% positive coverage of the mainstream media. Then Joe Biden sends another $8 billion to Ukraine for military aid and gives permission to use long-range missiles. The mainstream media is seemingly totally fine with this. This has become normal somehow. It seems like everyone wants to end the war except for the war hawks who are trying to ratchet up the stakes to keep the war going so the money keeps flowing. If the strategy were to keep Ukraine in a better position to negotiate their land back, then it would be beneficial to take some land back. The war hawks can say this is a negotiation strategy. However, the two main negotiating parties will be President Putin and President Trump. The more Zelensky pisses them both off, the more likely Trump will give more to Putin. If Zelensky became more dovish after Trump won, Ukraine could argue to get some land back. But after Zelensky's poor calculated move to push everyone closer to World War III, I wouldn't be surprised if Trump offers Putin even more than he's already taken. The great thing about America being a democratic republic is we can pivot out of terrible ideas and situations rather quickly. In the current administration, we have a corrupt bureaucrat who's been in politics for 50 years. He was being bribed by foreign powers to money launder hundreds of billions of dollars. A war was started with a superpower on the other side of the world. With one election, the people of the US announced with one voice, we are not okay with this corruption. The new administration can tell Russia, those crooks do not represent the US. This is what we stand for, and we're putting a stop to it right here and right now. We can stop the war and hopefully put the corrupt politicians in prison for treason. I am not for persecuting political opponents for the sake of political gain. This is different. You should punish treasonous behavior to deter future treason. Now, speaking of treason, there has been progress on the Hunter Biden saga. President Joe Biden finally pardoned his son. We all knew he would do it. In fact, we don't really blame him. Any father would pardon his son to prevent him from going to prison for the rest of his life. The left-wing media is trying to make the scandal about how Joe is such a good father for forgiving his son. The right-wing legacy is making the scandal to be about how Joe constantly said he wouldn't pardon his son, then kind of went back and said he would. The real scandal is that Joe pardoned his son for crimes that he knows his son committed. He's been denying that he knew his son has been doing business dealings, peddling his influence. And then Joe signs a sweeping pardon that stretches over 11 years, all the way into next year. Joe pardons Hunter for all crimes he may have committed. Joe pardons him for crimes he committed and may have committed. That's a big difference between just pardoning him and then identifying the crimes. Usually people are pardoned after they've been convicted, after they've been sentenced, and served some period of time. Hunter wasn't even sentenced. Let's be clear, the DOJ has been letting Hunter off easy this whole time, whether it be negotiating sweetheart deals or trying to work with a judge to let him off easy. But those weren't even his worst crimes. His worst crimes were bribery and money laundering. So far, he's only been charged for lying on a gun application and tax evasion. Those weren't even his worst crimes. His worst crimes were bribery, money laundering, and treason. Back in 2014, his father was vice president. Hunter was traveling the world picking up bags of cash from China, Russia, and Ukraine. Vice President Joe Biden was responsible for managing relations with Ukraine at the time, and Burisma was paying Hunter $50,000 a month to be on the board of an energy company, even though he had no background in energy and he didn't speak Ukrainian. This was openly a money laundering scheme, and Biden even admitted it in an interview, bragging about how Ukraine was trying to root out corruption, and Biden got the prosecutor fired by withholding military funds. Imagine, the US is making money off a corrupt system in Ukraine. Ukraine's government tries to clean up their corruption, and Biden gets a prosecutor fired to maintain the corruption. It's so dirty. That's why the pardon reaches back all the way to 2014. Biden needs the pardon to cover such a large time period, to cover any time period they were collecting cash. I'm surprised he didn't make the pardon so broad that it covers his brother, himself, even anybody called the big guy. That's why the Ukrainian, after all, received over $200 billion in taxpayer money. If you're wondering why our economy has been going down the toilet the last few years, it's because of the gross corruption, negligence, and the top Democratic Party getting paid off. Is your bridge falling apart? We don't have the money. Are you struggling from inflation? We don't have the money. Oh, you got hit by a hurricane? That sucks. We don't have the money. But somehow, we've come up with over 200 billion with a B, $200 billion to send to Ukraine so one guy doesn't go to jail for bribery. They even impeached Trump for a phone call where he was inquiring about the bribery between Ukraine and the Bidens. Trump got impeached over inquiring about the corruption that Hunter just got pardoned for. It's like we're imprisoning the cops for pointing out that the criminals are stealing. It's ridiculous. Now, it's all out in the open. We know the laptop from hell was real. We know Joe Biden knew about his son's business dealings. We know the 52 former intelligence agents colluded with the Bidens to draft a letter to blackball the laptop. We know Joe lied to run cover for his son Hunter for years. And we know we've thrown away over $200 billion laundering money into Ukraine, making a lot of corrupt politicians rich. Now, unfortunately, that's not the worst of it. The worst of it is, even though it made a lot of people rich, it also made a lot of people dead. Now, the greed caused a tremendous amount of death and turmoil, and nothing can bring them back. All we can do now is identify who's responsible, give them a fair trial, and hold them accountable for their actions. In a democratic republic, that's what we can do. We wouldn't get retribution, we would get justice. Now, speaking of justice, recently something that's floating around in the news is people are approaching the Biden administration for pardons. Now, this isn't pardons for some mistake about some clerical error, something got filed improperly. This is something a little bit worse. So the Biden administration has been approached by Representative Adam Schiff, Liz Cheney, and Anthony Fauci. These names may sound familiar. So Adam Schiff lied about having evidence about Trump being a Russian asset. You may have heard of something called the Russia collusion. So you may have heard of it. Adam Schiff and a team of Democrats led this narrative that sitting President Trump, was a Russian asset. Adam Schiff said that he had hard evidence in his possession that he was viewing that would be disclosed at a later date, but it's so classified he can't disclose it. But it's real. It's 100% real. He has it, and he's going to, at some point, it's going to be open to the public, and people are going to know why they want to impeach Trump. That was the idea. Well, it turns out that evidence never existed. He pushed a narrative for over 4 years. He was going on TV telling everybody that they have all this evidence, they have proof Trump was definitely a Russian asset. Turns out he was lying. Now, I don't know what you can call it. Maybe it's slander, maybe it's libel, maybe who knows what it is. Maybe it's worse. I mean, you're accusing the president of treason while he's sitting in office. So that might be worth looking into. And then we have Liz Cheney. Liz Cheney, who worked with the deep state to organize a kangaroo court called the January 6th Committee. You may have heard of that as well. She gathered evidence that Trump staged an insurrection and impeached him for wrongdoing, right? Oh, no, actually, they gathered a bunch of information, they collected the tapes, and they destroyed the evidence because the evidence actually exonerated Trump. And it incriminated Nancy Pelosi because she was found responsible for the security for the Capitol on January 6th. So after they held a whole kangaroo court to try to influence an election, it failed. And now the guy that's going to be the president is looking at him saying, hey, remember when you wrongfully persecuted me for 4 years? Maybe we should look into that. Maybe. And then we have Anthony Fauci. Oh man, he's probably the worst one. He lied about the origins of COVID-19, saying it's from some wet market in Wuhan, even though he knew about the gain of function research in Wuhan. He knew about the laboratory. He helped fund the laboratory, and he probably knew a lot of information that could have helped either cut the COVID pandemic short or at least mitigate the damage. There's a lot of information he withheld from the public that was probably going to be useful, but he didn't want to go to jail, so he just kept his mouth shut. He lied under oath. He perjured himself. And so maybe that should get an investigation. Maybe that should be looked into. So all these three people all did very shady things. Will Trump, seek revenge or retribution? I don't think so, but he's going to appoint people that are going to enforce the law, hold people accountable, bring them to justice, and they're going to get a fair trial. If they did something wrong, they might actually go to prison for criminal acts. Now, if they didn't do any criminal acts, they'll be left alone. But if we can go after Trump, tie him up in courts for something he never did anything wrong for, I think we can hold people accountable for things that they actually did wrong. Now, fortunately, we live in the greatest country in the world. We can turn a new page, and on November 5th, we proved that we can still determine our fate. There's a lot of energy in politics right now to drain the swamp, and we are going to clear out all the bureaucracy and corruption. January 20th can't come soon enough. As PBD says, the future looks bright. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. If so, please like and subscribe to the channel. Please leave a comment and let me know what you think. Thanks again for watching, and have a good one.